So much draft news dropped today, and we're going to break it all down for you next on the Unbearable Sports Podcast.
We're going to take the North and never give it back.
So that's a good pick. You get the corner. I got to go bold, right? I got to go bold for this.
Yeah, she's got some nice long
Welcome
hair.
back to the Unbearable Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Brad. Make sure to like and subscribe if you're out there on YouTube, and also rate the show 5 stars everywhere that you get your podcast. Like I was saying at the very little intro, there's a lot of news that broke, or not necessarily news, rumors, talks, kind of some of those draft smoke screens that we all know happens the first week, the week leading up to the draft. So I'm going to have you all covered with that because Adam Schefter was talking about stuff. Todd McShay was talking about stuff. Tom Pelissero, Ian Rappaport. So we have it all today. And the way I'm going to do this is we're just going to go through picks 1 all the way down to 10 with the Bears because there's so much chatter about what is kind of going on in between those picks. And I just want to see kind of how this kind of plays out for the Chicago Bears. Also, too, if you are new to the show, make sure to click the link down below in the description and download the free draft guide. It's over, 150 pages now. It's got so much draft content. So please feel free to download it. It's absolutely free, and I'll keep it updated. So just make sure, just check back into the show, and you can keep on getting the free draft guides out there. So we're going to be breaking it down 1 to 10. Let's get started, and let's talk a little bit about the Tennessee Titans. There really hasn't been much news, right? We're not going to go too crazy into this. They're going to be taking Cam Ward. That's pretty much set in stone. And the next piece, the Browns. I know that some people have said, well, what about Shedeur? They're really not going to go Shedeur. All the chatter now is if they were to go with like Shedeur Sanders, that's going to be more in the second round. The pick that they're going to go with is Travis Hunter. Now, yet again, Shedeur might be in the second round. You can pair him up with Travis Hunter. But yeah, I don't really, it's pretty much set in stone. Travis Hunter is going to be going to the Cleveland Browns. So now we get to the New York Giants, and there's some chatter about what the Giants are going to do. It's just some of the news or some of the discussions that were happening today. You know, it's the whole question about, well, Shedeur Sanders has been visiting with the Giants. Now, if you look at the potential options, it's really Abdul Carter or Shedeur Sanders. And it's really like 99% going to be Abdul Carter. Now, there's some talks. Todd McShay was one of the people talking about it, that, hey, it seems a little split, that some people might want Shedeur Sanders, but it does just feel like Abdul Carter is going to be that guy. And a big talking point as well is the rumor is that there's a lot of people out there that are looking at Shedeur Sanders mainly from the sense of how does he go up against these other quarterbacks that are out there. That second wave, the Jackson Darts out there, the second wave of quarterbacks, because a lot of people are more so seeing Shedeur Sanders as that second tier of quarterback. Now, yet again, it takes one team to actually draft Shedeur, and there's a lot of rumors out there that, well, hey, maybe the Steelers like him if he drops to them at 21. But overall, when we're just talking simply about this draft, it should probably be Abdul Carter still at that number 3 spot. It would be an absolute shock if they ended up going with Shedeur Sanders, especially since Brian Daboll also kind of has one foot out the door over there in New York. So let's keep on going to where it finally kind of gets interesting, and that's the New England Patriots, where if you're talking about might they draft, everybody's still kind of saying Will Campbell. Now, the thing that I want to talk about about this whole thing with, okay, well, with the New England Patriots, they should get Will Campbell. Well, a lot of the chatter that's going on right now, Joe Klatt, he's got his own sports show out there. He talked about this, and he used the terms that the Patriots are forced into picking Campbell. And, Mel Kiper, Field Yates all think Campbell because the Patriots need it. And Todd McShay, everybody's kind of talking about the Patriots kind of just have to get Will Campbell. And why would someone use the term like being forced to take Will Campbell? And why people are just saying they have to? Well, Todd McShay actually, I like the way that he said this. He said that Will Campbell is offensive tackle in this draft, but last year, and I'm starting to see more people kind of come around to this idea and speak realistically about it. Will Campbell would have been offensive tackle for last season because a lot of people, like myself included, I really liked Olu Fashanu. I also really liked the right tackle of Fuanga out of Oregon State. I would actually have him above Will Campbell. I would have Will Campbell as offensive tackle number 4, which sounds crazy because he's going at that number 4 pick. But a lot of people feel that way too. McShay was talking about that on his show. He said, quote, no one in the league thinks he's worth that pick, but he's there. And then the concept that people are bringing up is when you look at what happened with the Kansas City Chiefs, it's Will Campbell or Joe Thuney was shorter arms, same length as Will Campbell, phenomenal guard, right? Because people are like, Will Campbell could probably be that guard position, but still it's that when you're talking about the number 4 overall pick, you expect this amazing caliber prospect, but more of the NFL is kind of coming around to just like, he's the guy that you want to lead the team. He's a leader in the offensive line room, right? No one is fighting that. He's got very good athletic traits, but people are saying the prospect, like how he actually blocks, the length, it is to be desired. Yet again, he's not an awful player, not anything like that. But if someone said, hey, I'm going to draft Tylise Fuanga last year at number 4, people would go, wait, what? Like, why are you going to go with him at pick number 4? But it just adds to this where no one really gave good options. Everyone that I was like listening to, it was just, you kind of just have to go with Will Campbell here. And just, this could be an interesting spot. Now, David Siverston of our lads did say, hey, he was thinking, well, maybe Genty goes to the Patriots. But I think really a lot of the points are just saying Will Campbell to the Patriots looks to be that way, even though that the NFL is not as high on someone like that going that high. So just a little note about that being a little bit more interesting than what I think people are saying. But at the same time, people I don't think really know what the Patriots would really do at that number 4 spot. So people say Campbell. So now let's get into the Jacksonville Jaguars, because Jacksonville Jaguars, as people are saying, at Adam Schefter said they said recently, Jacksonville is a wild card to watch. And this one was the one that a lot of people were buzzing about today, because with the Jacksonville Jaguars, some of the talk was all over the place because everybody gives them Mason Graham. Everybody is like, okay, they're going Mason Graham. And you see what people are talking about. And a lot of people saying Mason Graham not to the Jacksonville Jaguars. Todd McShay being one of those. When you also have Field Yates as well, saying, hey, when the coach brings in when you bring in a head coach first and then a GM, a lot of times that head coach has more say in what player they're going to pick rather than the GM. Because the GM is there because of the head coach. And the head coach is an offensive-minded player. So, you have Field Yates saying this. You have Todd McShay saying this. You have, Joe Klatt saying, hey, everyone loves Genty. He could be the pick there as well. And then, 2, so a lot of buzz about them potentially taking an offensive position, an offensive playmaker, rather than just Mason Graham. A lot of the talk is now on other positions. But one other piece I want to talk about was Tom Pelissero from NFL Network talking about how if you look at that number 5 position, Ashton Genty has met 3 different teams, the Bears, the Raiders, and the Cowboys, and that's it. Now, the GM of the Jaguars comes from the Rams philosophy where they don't really visit and meet a lot of players. So Genty could still be on their board at that number 5 spot. A lot of people are kind of saying, well, hey, they could go that route to then get this playmaker rather than like ETN. Do they want to move on from him? I don't really buy that in particular, but it's supposedly around the NFL, they're insane, or everyone is insanely high on Ashton Genty. So this kind of sparked the rumors of what if the Bears were to trade up for someone like an Ashton Genty? which I do think is a very, very big possibility depending on how much, and I've said this before, I think it definitely is a possibility because of how much I feel the Bears love Ashton Genty and how much they want to get a playmaker for this offense. Now, I'm not saying that I would do it, but think about it. With DeAndre Swift, after a single season in the Ben Johnson offense, they not just got DeAndre Swift's replacement, they got two people to replace DeAndre Swift and then shipped him off. They got David Montgomery, and then they drafted Jahmyr Gibbs with a high draft pick just to ship out DeAndre Swift. I don't feel like, if you told me that they weren't convinced about DeAndre Swift, I'm not saying DeAndre Swift has a down year in Ben Johnson's system. He's going to have a better season. Like, you can count on that. But it's, what does he actually want? And that's why I think if the Bears were to trade up, it would be to this number 5 spot at Jacksonville with a rookie GM, and they would trade their first and then probably the number 41 pick. I don't think they'd get anything back or anything like that unless Jacksonville's nice and threw in a day 3 pick of some sort. But anyways, besides the whole trading up, the spot to look out and the name to watch for the Jacksonville Jaguars is Tet McMillan out of Arizona. Tet McMillan reminds a lot of people of Mike Evans. And when you look at what Mike Evans does as well, Mike Evans, Tet McMillan play style very, very similar. And, McShay was one of the people talking about this. A lot of people, Schefter too, saying Jaguars, Liam Cohen has a soft spot for wide receivers. And also Adam Schefter brought up Tet McMillan being in play at that number 5 spot. So if I'm thinking about who might be there, Tet McMillan, I sincerely think might be, in my opinion, kind of the person that they might end up going with, getting a taller wide receiver, someone that Trevor Lawrence really likes. So I wanted to throw that out there as to what might happen, because that would be fantastic for the Chicago Bears to see Mason Graham and Ashton Genty kind of drop down that list. So now we get into the Raiders, where the Raiders, this is the big talk, right? Everybody kind of saw, or if you haven't already, there's the discussion with the Raiders about what they should do at that number 6 pick. And then right then, Pete Carroll turns to Spy Tech and says, keep it cool about like Ashton Genty or and stuff like that, where people are like, oh man, they're going to go with them. But still, people aren't necessarily sold that the Raiders are sold on drafting Ashton Genty at that spot. This is where I think that there might be some smoke screen. I think that the Raiders at this 6th spot is just a giant smoke screen because there's so much talk about what they might do. But a lot of people, or some of the chatter that was going on today, Field Yates said he's not necessarily, or Joe Klatt said he's not confident with what they're actually going to, or at the number 6 spot. Here we go. I got to pull up my notes. Mel Kiper saying it's either Genty or Membu is his thought. Albert Breer flat out said, I don't think they go Genty. Todd McShay, he says, I don't think they go Ashton Genty. Field Yates, I'm not convinced they go Ashton Genty. And Mel said, hey, I think that, or he's not as convinced. Mel Kiper still thought Ashton Genty, but really Yates, Schefter, a lot of people are saying that Armand Membu might be the person that they go after because you have Colton Miller at that left tackle spot. You can then solidify the right tackle spot and really make this offensive line something. So Armand Membu seems to be the person that a lot of people are talking about, that right tackle out of Missouri. Now, 2 other people to at least just keep an eye out for, because the Raiders have terrible corners, are Jahdae Barron and Will Johnson, the cornerbacks. That many people seeing them as the 2 top corners that are out there. If the Raiders who don't have any corners, that might be a potential pick. But right now, if you're talking about the favorites, right, or kind of the shift in where people are saying that they might go, Jacksonville might shift from Mason Graham to Tet McMillan, and the Raiders might shift from Ashton Genty over to Armand Membu. Something to at least just start watching a little bit with this as we head up to the draft. And now we go into the Jets as we get closer and closer to the Bears pick. And the Jets, another interesting spot, because this is where people are saying, Armand Mambu, right? Solidify the line for Justin Fields, their new quarterback, so that he's not getting absolutely bombarded. Now, Mambu is still somebody that people have been talking about as someone that is going to be out there. But Joe Klatt mentioned, hey, Mambu, he's not necessarily like confident. Even though he had Mambu in his mock draft, he said he's not confident that they would actually go Mambu. And this kind of goes into the whole Jacksonville Jaguars theory, where if you have an offensive-minded head coach, you go offense. And with the Jets, you have Aaron Glenn coming over and probably wants to do something with this defense. So there's been a lot of chatter. Actually, before we go over to the defense, there has also been chatter from Adam Schefter saying, well, maybe Tyler Warren, the tight end out of Penn State. This would be a nightmare if Genty's gone, Tyler Warren's gone. But Tyler Warren might end up going to the Jets. I've heard this as well from other people that cover New York. Connor Rogers is actually one that has talked a lot about potentially Tyler Warren being the pick there for the New York Jets too. So someone to at least keep an eye out for. But next, other players that might be there at 7 that they would be considering. Todd McShay brought up Jahdae Barron. Also Jalen Walker. So trying to solidify the defense by going with some of these playmakers that can make these plays. Jahdae Barron also being a big time playmaking cornerback. That's more the ball hawking type. Not necessarily great in man coverage, but more of a zone coverage. Great eyes to try to make some big plays. But then the next piece too, also Adam Schefter saying that Jahdae Barron being linked with the New York Jets as well, with Aaron Glenn, yet again, being a former corner, might be trying to, hey, let's go corner, solidify our corner room, and have some big-time playmakers that he wants to have on that outside. So just some people to watch out for. So now how are we feeling, right? What are some of those smoke screens that we, does anybody see some of the smoke screens that might be happening? Think about some of the smoke screens that might be out there. But like I said, there's so much information. And now we are just starting getting into the number 8 pick, number 9, and then over to the Bears. So let's talk about the Panthers, where the Panthers aren't as interesting as the others. The Panthers, people are really just saying, a lot of people are just linking them to defensive linemen, pass rushers. It just seems like that seems to be what they're trying to go for, which still also gets me a little confused because I'm like, okay, they're being constantly linked to pass rushers. There's got to be something else, right? There's got to be somebody else, but it's still going with Jalen Walker. And also there's more and more and more hype about Mykel Williams, the defensive end out of Georgia, or the edge out of Georgia, going higher than what people expect. Mykel Williams being kind of talked a little bit about at this number 8 spot. Being talked about it both from Todd McShay, but also Field Yates. And Todd McShay even mentioned too, the intel that he's getting is that Mykel Williams is a hot name. And I thought that I didn't jot exactly who it was down here, but there was more people that I've just seen out on Twitter, actual sources talking about that Mykel Williams is definitely somebody to keep an eye out for, going higher than expected. So now let's get into the actual Saints pick right before the Bears. And the talk is that it's not going to be Shedeur. And if you think about this, Shedeur Sanders really only kind of came around when it was the whole Derek Carr show. And a lot of the talk, Schefter has a healthy scope of skepticism that Shedeur would actually be the pick. Adam Schefter doubting that. You have Field Yates saying, I don't think it's quarterback. You have Adam Schefter thinking that it's probably going to be, then we also have Todd McShay, kind of similar thing, saying, hey, New Orleans is more of a Jackson Dart guy. It's probably not going to be Shedeur, and they might just wait until the second round in order to draft one of these quarterbacks. Or yet again, if someone were to trade up, they would go into that range. Because something that was also very, very, very interesting to see, or interesting to hear, Todd McShay, Mel Kiper, and Field Yates all echoing the same sentiment. Right now, the line is set at 2.5 quarterbacks taken in the first round. All 3 of them said pound the under. They're like, there's not going to be 3 quarterbacks. And even Todd McShay was saying there's probably a better chance, and his co-host was saying that there's probably a better chance only one goes in the first round than three, because it just kind of shows kind of what the NFL is starting to think about Shedeur Sanders. But still, it still feels like Shedor's going to be a first round pick. It just feels like the Jackson Darts and stuff like that, not so much. But so who would be the pick if it's not Shedeur? This is where Mykel Williams really kind of stands out. And I think that this could be that spot for Mykel Williams because, yet again, more talks about who does he remind people of? He's someone that reminds a lot of people of Cameron Jordan. And that's what, yet again, Todd McShay was talking a little bit about Cam Jordan, saying, hey, these pass rushers might go a little bit higher up just because of positional value. And this could be one of those spots that he ends up going. Also, too, Brandon Staley visited Georgia. So look for that as well with just, potentially going Mykel Williams or even like a Jalen Walker. Also, too, Kelvin Banks is another name that kind of came out there as well. They need a left tackle or they just need offensive linemen. And Kelvin Banks, yet again, might be higher up than a lot of other people. And that's actually what Adam Schefter said. Kelvin Banks might be one of those guys that goes a little bit higher than people are expecting, with people kind of projecting that floor might be the Miami Dolphins, just because depending on how these offensive linemen end up going, he could be that pick at the number 9 spot. So lots of uncertainty with this draft. And that's why I was like, I just wanted to go through a lot of this today because there's just so many things out there. And now we're finally at our Chicago Bears, where that David Siverston, totally butchered his name, but from our lads. And then you have all sorts of people like Adam Schefter saying the Bears are praying Genty slips. Really what it's looking like. McShay was talking about this. That guy from our lads was talking about this. Joe Klatt was talking a little bit about this as well. Like a lot of people are saying there's probably going to be somebody good available for the Bears down there. It could be Ashton Genty. It could be Tyler Warren. It could be Mason Graham. Yet again, Mason Graham, we're just talking about this. He might be a sneaky faller if he's not taken by Jacksonville. Because maybe the Raiders want a D tackle on the interior of that line. And maybe the Jets even kind of go after something like that. But Graham is sneaky to potentially drop down to the Bears. So in my opinion, look at those 3 players. Hopefully we can get one of those. It seems like there might be a good chance. Field Yates was saying, hey, he feels like there's going to be a 50% chance that Genty is there for the Chicago Bears. But man, I hope one of those 3 players are there, right? That's the next level. The next people that are just being talked about, Kelvin Banks is someone that was talked about a little bit from Joe Klatt. You see Kelvin Banks being more discussed. You also see kind of the split in the fan base about Kelvin Banks. Now, more and more people that talk about him, like yet again, like a Joe Klatt was saying, hey, he had a bad Georgia game. And I agree. The Georgia game was not great. You look at everything else, he had a pretty good season. I still feel like there were some negatives and just times that he got rocked or shook a little bit on tape, but he does have some good darn potential. And then also too, someone else that is being talked about a little bit more among Bear circles, that is Colson Loveland. And just definitely somebody to at least keep an eye out for the Chicago Bears. That's the tight end out of Michigan. Just because people are saying that is someone that can be used as a true weapon. He's very, very speedy, very, very quick. So look for him potentially. Or as Mel Kiper said, this might be a prime spot for the Bears to actually look to trade down and try to entice someone to come up for Colson Loveland. Or maybe if Kelvin Banks is there, try to entice like the Miami Dolphins to move up and go for that number 13 spot. So, like I said, lots and lots of stuff that we had to cover today. Lots of stuff that we had to go through. So if you appreciate that, make sure to hit the like button, subscribe out there on YouTube. We have so much more draft content to be going through this week. So make sure to stay tuned. Download the draft guide. If you want a free draft guide with so much content, position breakdowns of all the different players. And with that, Unbearable Sports Podcast, we are out.
Yeah, she's got some nice long hair, and you know that she's a bride.